Hey everybody, Mike B here, back with another World War I video. Today we're going to be talking about the French infantry main rifles. I did a video a couple days ago on the main rifles of the United States in the First World War. There should be a link somewhere, whether it's in the description or it pops up on the video as a related video, because they are very similar in a lot of respects, which we'll talk about. And I know, we'll just do a couple little caveats. I do know that just like every other military in the First World War, there were a ton of weapons utilized by different units, and this exception and that exception and this and that. And well, what about this one? I'm going to try to focus on the main two infantry rifles that you're going to see in a lot of pictures, and saw a lot of action on the front. I know there were carbines, short rifles, pistols, all that stuff, but for the sake of keeping this video as short as possible so I don't rant for days, months, weeks, hours, years, we're just going to be focusing on two weapons today. And I'm going to explain to you how they were used, when they were used, and why there were two of them and not just one standardized weapon. So with that, there might be a couple more caveats that pop up a little bit. Just note that I'm trying to make this as simple as possible and keep this as on point as possible as far as these two weapons, and I'm not going to be talking about other things in this video. All right, let's start this off with the weapon that France entered the First World War with in 1914, which is the Fusil M1886-93, better known as the Lebel. I don't speak fluent French, so sorry for butchering that. But this was chambered at 8x51 rimmed, and it was a bolt-action rifle, obviously, very 19th century. And it was the most advanced military rifle at the time. It was introduced in 1886, and it was very quickly outdated by magazine-fed rifles like the Mauser and the Gewehr 88 commission rifle and other designs like that. So it was the first smokeless powder, small caliber military rifle actually adopted into service. So they do have that to brag about. But it was quickly outdated. But knowing the French, they said, nah, it works. We already paid for it. We got the design. We're going to make it work. So this was used throughout the entire First World War, the Second, and even the 1950s by the French Foreign Legion. So when they entered the war, they had this puppy. And like a lot of French firearms, it's very thin. The profile is very thin, like from the top down, but it is very long, very tall, like a lot of 19th century firearms. The cartridge that it fires, the 8x51, it's kind of a beefy round. It's actually got some oomph to it. I've shot this thing in real life, and it's pretty cool. Now, the interesting feature about the 1886-93 is there is a tubular magazine down here that I can stick my pinky in that holds 7 of these bad boys, right? And then you pop the feed ramp up, you throw this thing on, the magazine cut off, so this won't cycle. And French doctrine was to have the magazine loaded, carry on an empty chamber, but when you were in combat, you would single load, you would take this out of your pouch and single load, drop that into the feed ramp, and then pop it into the chamber and use it until it necessitated an emergency, and the command would be given where you would flip the magazine cutoff back to using it, and then you'd have 7 rounds readily available. That actually made this the second highest magazine capacity weapon besides the short magazine Lee Enfield, which held 10 rounds. So that was an advantage of it. Some of the gripes that the Poilu had about the platform itself was the fact that this thing does suck, and it is very tedious to load the magazine in a combat setting individually. Factor in mud, explosions kind of throwing you off. Not a fun rifle to load in combat. So that was a big disadvantage. However, if it was used properly and the guys are familiar with it, it was very effective. Whether you were being overrun, you could pop that 7 rounds off pretty quick. Or if you were assaulting a position, you could pop that 7 rounds off pretty quick, but then you're kind of stuck with a really bad reload. Another gripe they had was about the sights. And this isn't a big deal, but it was enough of a deal for them to actually consistently mention this in a lot of memoirs and stuff like that. The sights are really good for target sights, but they're very small. I like them because I target shoot. I'm not using this in combat. And the front sight blade is extremely thin, and the rear sight's very thin too, until you pop it up to about 500 meters and you get that V-notch, but it's still very, very low profile. Again, great for target shooting, not so much a great battle sight. So they obviously made do with this thing, but those were the two main gripes. And then the third one was, as you can see, there's no handguard on the top of the barrel. So when you fire this thing off, a lot of people would burn their hands if they were bounding or, grabbing it like this, or just, you hit the hot metal like that. So that was another gripe that they had. Other than that, actually not a terrible rifle for the time. You can argue that, but I don't believe it was the worst main rifle of the First World War. But this is the one that you're going to see the most of very early on. Much like most countries, including the video that I did the other day with the US, France was not an exception of not expecting the scale of the First World War and how many troops and how much equipment went with them and how many losses there would be very rapidly. So when they entered the war, within the first 6 to 9 months, the French were losing, and the Germans and everyone on the Western Front, were losing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of casualties, and equipment also goes along with those numbers, because if you get somebody that's blown to smithereens, well, that weapon's not going to survive. So you're down weapons and bodies. Well, what do you equip the new bodies with if you don't have enough weapons? These things, the manufacturers were making as many as they possibly could, as fast as possible, but they just weren't being able to keep up. So what they did is, because of all those other weird weapons that they had and they've been using since the 1890s, they decided that they were going to introduce a second rifle that was an improvement. The stopgap solution that ended up being a permanent solution, which also had its problems, is the next rifle we're going to be talking about. And that is the Berthier Model 0715. Now, the history behind the 0715 is kind of interesting, but I'll keep it pretty short. The Berthier platform started out as actually a carbine. In 1890, it was adopted for cavalry specifically, and then artillery units started getting issued them, some support units, rear echelon units. So the Berthier kind of became the weapon of non-infantry. The Lebel was always seen as kind of the main frontline rifle of the French infantry. And this kind of took a back seat, and they didn't really have a rifle version until 1907, when they came out with the Berthier Model 1907, which was called a short rifle. So it was a little bit shorter than this. And it also had, as you can see, this has got a straight bolt. The 1907 had a curved bolt like the cavalry carbines. And to simplify production, they decided to just stop with the curved bolt and go with the straight bolt. So that's one way you can tell. And it's also an improvement because it's very similar to the Lebel. So handling is very similar to that. This has also got a really cool magazine system that's really fast to reload. It uses end blocks, or packets, if you will. Some people call it a packet. I think it's an end block, which you just push in like that with one hand. That's why the cavalry liked it. It was designed for use on horseback. Very easy to reload 3 rounds. Now, the problem is it's only 3 rounds. So you're sitting there loading 3 rounds repeatedly. Just when you start getting in the groove, boom, you got to pop another M block in there. And just like, most systems, this little hole in the bottom, it would fall out when you got the 3 rounds fired and you pop a new one in. So that was considered both a drawback and an advantage by whoever you ask. Certain units got these, certain soldiers got these. I don't know that like I did with the US units a little bit, but maybe I'll do a video on that eventually. But you're going to see that a lot more of the French soldiers liked the Lebel better. And it could have been from the dirt getting in the magazine cutout right there for the M block to drop through. The rifle itself is not a terrible rifle. It works well. It slings rounds just like the Lebel, but it takes some getting used to the reloading. The sights are different too. They're kind of chunkier and blockier. However, they're not as precise as the Lebel. They're kind of they're okay for really kind of close range within 100 meters or so. But once you start getting past that, it's they're cavalry sights. They're made for carbines, although they did obviously make a rear leaf for the rifle length barrel. It was still a cavalry front sight, which is an inverted thing where you put your target actually. It's very weird. You put your target in that little notch. You line this up with the rear sight. You put the whole front sight post within the notch in the rear sight, and then you use that little notch in there. So you got to do like 3 things at one time. It's kind of a weird thing. Now, when they started producing these, a bunch of different factories did just like the Lebel. They tried to streamline the 07 rifle into the version that became the 0715, and we're thinking, how do we have the most amount of interchangeable parts that are kind of universal? So they modified the barrel band a little bit up here for the bayonet so that it could use the Rosalie bayonet, just like the Lebel, because the Berthier had its own proprietary bayonet, and they wanted to just make sure that these were interchangeable. And so they started doing that. I believe at one point, don't quote me, but it's worth noting and mentioning. If you do know this, please post a comment with this and your source, because I have seen it before that they also made the barrels themselves interchangeable with the Lebel for, you know, and they just put different sights on them. That could be false, that could be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure I've read that on more than one occasion and heard that from people. So they tried to just streamline interchangeability. Obviously it doesn't work. You've got the same ammunition, but you also need chargers for this, or M blocks, whatever you want to call them. Or you could single load it, but it's not made to do that. A lot of the guys just didn't like these that much, but you get what you get, and at least it's a rifle, not a wooden stick, right? So by about 1916, you're going to see, this was modified in 1916. I'm just going over the 0715 because that's the most common. The 1916 version had a 5-round M block with an extended magazine on the outside, but that really didn't see a lot of service until mid to late 1918 because of production issues, and just it was a catastrophe. Just it was not. I mean, France was just running on 150% in their economy for the whole war, and some things just didn't make it to the front. So these were used by a bunch of French soldiers, and they would kind of give these to units that maybe weren't going to see a lot of combat. They did give these to the US 93rd Division that went over there. It's the African American guys from New York, and they were issued the Berthier 0715 predominantly. They had some Lebels, but they were kind of given as the rifle that we don't really want it. It's not bad, but we'll just take our Lebels, right? So you're going to have these two. They were made in the millions, both of them. These things saw service again through the Second World War and beyond in different countries, former colonies and stuff like that. Insane. It was not the best loved rifle, but it still was very present on the Western Front and other fronts too. So the bayonet for both of these rifles is a very interesting design. It's called the Rosalie, the colloquial term. It's just a very thin cruciform bayonet, very 19th century, end of 19th century, common. It's very thin though, so a lot of these would break off and guys didn't really like it. They'd make little fighting knives out of them that were about that long. But as you can see, this fits on just like that. Very, very tall. This is a little bit shorter than the Lebel too. I'll pull that right after this. You can see what they both look like with the bayonet on them. But yeah, this was interchangeable, which was a very positive thing. But yeah, as promised, here's the Lebel with the same bayonet. So this is just a tad taller than the Berthier. Maybe it's the same, but yeah, it's substantially long. This is a very 19th century concept, as well as if you have the farther reach, you win. That proved to not be as true as they wanted it to once trench warfare started in 1915. These things are very hard to use in close quarters. I mean, I've got probably 6 feet of reach right here, but this is a long weapon. When I'm out here, this thing's heavy. It can be pulled. Both these rifles are very long. So, but they do use the same bayonet. And one other thing I forgot to mention is, maybe I did, but if I didn't, I just want to cover this base. I don't know the numbers. I know that there were millions of each of these produced. I don't know the exact numbers. It's very difficult to find for me. And I don't know which units got them, which percentage got Berthiers versus Lebels. I really don't know that. So otherwise I would put it in the video. Maybe I'll make another one in the future because it gives me an excuse to play dress up in mommy's basement or backyard for this video. But I'm just letting you know that I don't know that, like I did a little bit for the US video. So there you have it, the absolute basic overview of the main two French infantry rifles of the First World War. Hopefully I'll be able to do videos on carbines and other different things. And actually I'll go through, once I get more gear, this is an absolute basic loadout, very hard to find, very expensive. So I'm still working on it, but once I get a little bit more gear, I'll do a video on what a standard, well, it's a fun word, just like these rifles, who knows who got what. But just a general idea of what a French soldier would have looked like in the First World War from 1915 on. But the videos are coming. Just thank you for being patient. Now, I don't know which one is better per se. I think they both did what they were supposed to do, but I guess it's user preference. They're both rifles. Oh, the Berthier might be a little bit, oh man, it's like a 1/4 inch shorter. But I mean, it seems like they're very similar and they both have their advantages and disadvantages. But if you're used to one of them, I can see why you wouldn't like the other, because they do operate fairly differently as far as loading and maintenance and stuff like that. But I mean, you really can't tell. Either one works. If you're going to be putting an impression together, probably best to find somebody who knows more about this topic than me to figure out which rifle would be more accurate for your unit that you're portraying. I don't know if it matters. I've seen original photos where it's the same unit and there's both rifles. Just, it's whatever they could get, especially at Verdun. Man, I mean, they would rotate units in and out of there and stuff would break. So they would have a bunch of cool photos of that. Just nothing's uniform. Everything's just different and whatnot. So your mileage may vary on your research, but that's what I've uncovered. I guess if I had to pick, honestly, I'd take the 1886-93 just because I'm more familiar with it. And I don't really like the sights on the Berthier at all. Loading, the Berthier, it doesn't bother me to put another end block in. I haven't used it, you know, obviously in combat conditions where there's dirt and other things at play, but I have fired this one and I love the sights and it's very accurate, very easy to use when you're not under pressure. So I'm just going to say this one for the sake of this video. Which one would you choose if you had to go back in time and you were forced to be a pilot on the Western Front in 1915, 16, or 17, or 18? Which one would you choose and why? Throw that in the comments. That's about all I've got on this topic. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I do like teaching about what I know about these topics, which on French is ever growing and it takes a long time, but I'm going to get there eventually. So I appreciate you guys watching. And again, I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. But again, I don't know very much about World War I French stuff. I just know the basic level of knowledge that you may not have known, but maybe this will spark interest in it. And that's kind of why I make these videos. That's all I've got. If you want to support more videos like this to be made, because this stuff is very expensive to kind of teach you with. I like using props because it helps me learn, so I figured it'd help a lot of people learn. And it kind of brings history to life, because you can look at a black and white photo and it's a black and white photo, you know what it looks like, but I kind of like seeing it in color and on someone and moving, and it's, you know, real. It's an actual person, how it would have looked over 100 years ago. But that being said, these things, like I said, are expensive. And what really helps is like Patreon, YouTube membership. A little shout out, welcome to all of our new Patreon supporters and YouTube members. You guys are awesome. And $5 a month or more on either method of support gets you into my Discord server, which is really cool. There's so many cool people on there. Very fun topics that we talk about. A bunch of history nerds, gun guys. It's pretty sweet in there. So that's a little bit incentive. And yeah, I mean, otherwise I just appreciate you watching. If you don't want to do the Patreon and YouTube channel member thing. And yeah, I mean, obviously you could just like the video and share it out and comment to help out too if you want to do that route. That doesn't cost anything. So anyway, all jokes aside, you guys are awesome. And I will try to get as many videos out before the frozen north becomes the frozen north here in about a month or a month and a half. So let me know ideas of what you would like to see on these topics. World War I is probably my favorite time period, and very few people cover it. So plan on keeping going with this. Let's go for a walk. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.